Great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining the financial literacy section. We'll be hearing from our Adriana Martinez Guzman, and she'll be supported by Agnes Noonan of West, an entrepreneurial support organization. So I'm going to now turn it over to you, Adriana, while Jeff brings up your slides. So we'll give that just a moment until he shares.
Thank you, Jen. Okay. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today and also be able to support the New Mexico Rotary District 5520 through the Empowering Girls Digital Conference. I am grateful for your interest in learning more about empowering girls through financial capability. My name is Adriana, and I work for West, a statewide nonprofit organization that was started in 1989, dedicated to helping people throughout New Mexico start and grow businesses. West was founded by Joelyn Murphy, Carol Radosovic, I hope I'm saying that right, and Jessica Gleiken as a 501c3 with a mission of facilitating business startups and growth in New Mexico. West target markets are identified as women, people of color, and low-wealth New Mexicans. We have Agnes Noonan here with us today, our president. And Agnes, I don't know if you'd like to say a quick hello.
Hi, everyone. We think this topic of financial literacy for girls is just critical, and it has been for decades. And so we're delighted to be with you today and share some of our info and thoughts about this topic. Thanks, Adriana.
Of course, thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on to slide 2. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit more. So as I mentioned, my name is Adriana, and I am the Money Learning Lab program manager here at West. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about the program later. I hold a master's degree in social work, and I have worked in the financial sector for now over a decade. My work has primarily focused on community development and financial capability, and I'm super excited to spend the next hour exploring the importance of financial capability with each of you, and also hearing about your interests and experience around this category. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So my goal for us today is to provide you with an understanding of the impact of the lack of financial education and resources that women have had. So we will define the term financial capability. We will discuss more about what West is currently doing to be able to increase access and education for girls and women. And lastly, we will also explore ways in which each of you can make a difference in your communities. So we'll go on to the next slide. We're going to start by doing an interactive activity to test your knowledge. We will discuss each topic or of each question as we go, and I'll provide further information about each of the questions. You're welcome to type in your answer in the chat or also track it on a piece of paper. There will be a total of 7 questions. And we'll go over each answer as we move along through the questions. So I'll give each of you some time to take out a piece of paper. And I do have, let me pull up the chat here so I can keep an eye on it. But we'll go ahead and start with the first question. So we'll go on to the next slide as well. Perfect, thank you. So the first question is geared towards understanding knowledge that women have in comparison to men. So the question is, when asked to complete a survey testing the financial knowledge of women and men, what % of women answered all 3 questions correct in comparison to 38% of men? So we have 10%, 18%, 22%, or 30%. I'll give you all some time to look over the question and type in your answers. And although it is a quiz, it's okay to get them incorrect. Awesome. So I see that Bianca put B. Awesome. So we have 10%, Give a couple more seconds for any of you all that would like to share. So for this one, the correct answer is 22%. So a study published by the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which tested the financial knowledge of both men and women, found that in the United States, 38% of men were able to completely answer all 3 questions correctly, compared to only 22% of women. It is important to note that the study was also done in other countries. So for example, in the Netherlands, 55% of men were able to answer these questions correctly, when 35% of women were able to answer correctly as well. They also did a similar study in Germany, which the results were 60% of men compared to 48% of women. So in all of the studies that were done across multiple countries that are listed in this study, found that there was a gap between the knowledge of men and women. It is also important to note that a large gender gap was not only found among women who were married, but also women who are single or widows, for which we would imagine that making smart, independent financial decisions is likely to have had a greater impact in their lives. We also want to note that this gap was observed among economically disadvantaged women, as well as those who were in favorable economic circumstances. And it was also even apparent in young women, who typically tend to have higher levels of education and workforce participation. So it's important just to note that even across different socioeconomic statuses, even among different marital statuses, these differences were still measurable. And it's even more important to note that even when women were the household decision makers, they still tended to have less financial knowledge than men who were also the decision makers. So there's definitely something related to the genders, and we'll go into more depth about what those factors might be. But it is important to note that there is a discrepancy between knowledge between women and men across different categories and across different countries that were cited in this study. Perfect. So let's go ahead and go on to our next question. So slide 6, please. Thank you. So this one is related to income. In the median earnings for women in 2021 were what percentage of the median earnings for men? We have 83%, 72, 70, 87%, 91, and 94%. I'll give you a few minutes to write down your answers. Awesome. So the correct answer is 83.1%. So according to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, in 2021, the median weekly earnings for wages and salary workers who usually worked full-time were $998. The median wages for women were $912. So that is about 83% of men's earnings. So there's a lot of reasons why this might be, and we don't have the time to discuss a full conversation about the wage gap. But it is important that we do note that there is a difference between how much women are earning in comparison to men, and how that might impact their ability to maintain financial prosperity and be able to manage the financial aspects of their lives. So that is correct. So 83.1% of men's earnings is the correct answer. Now we will go ahead and move on to the next question. So this is related to emergency savings. So in a recent study conducted by the Credit Union National Association in 2022, estimated that about what percent of women did not have enough savings to cover a $500 emergency? Awesome. So I do see a couple of you answering the chat. Thank you so much. So in a recent study that was conducted by the Credit Union National Association revealed that the correct answer here is listed under 40, so D, 46% of women. However, it is important to note that in this research study, it was measuring the difference between credit unions and those women who were members of credit unions and women who were not. And so although the correct answer is 46%, they did have a reported 30% of women. So a little bit less of a percentage. Note what is it called? They self-disclosed that they had $500 or less. So I just wanted to make that difference. They also found that the Credit Union National Association revealed that about 60%, right, of women ages 45 to 60 don't have an emergency fund that could cover their expenses for even 6 months. So that is a huge percentage of women that not only do not have the those resources to cover $500, which is almost half of women who participated in the survey, did not have a $500 savings, and even more, which we would expect, that women between 45 and 60 were getting closer to retirement age. They also didn't have enough funds to be able to cover their expenses for less than 6 months. So just to add some comparison, in that study, they also found that 43% of women reported that they didn't have enough money to cover for an emergency fund, while it was 63% of men. The gap was even wider between men and women aged 55 to 64, where just 50% of women in that age group had an emergency fund, while 82% of men did. So there are discrepancies also in just the amount of women who have emergency savings set aside or who even have an emergency fund created. So we can also note that as well. So we'll go ahead on to the next slide. If we could please, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So in this question, we're going to go ahead and note what percentage of women ages 55 to 66 have no personal retirement savings in comparison to 47% of men. Perfect. Thank you. Awesome. So the answer is 50% of women ages 55 to 66 do not have any personal retirement savings. Now, I want to note this is really important because as we're having these conversations, it's important to note that financial education does disproportionately impact women, but financial education or the lack of or access to resources is something that impacts both men and women. So although right now we are taking a lens of what, we're taking a lens of focusing of the discrepancies in women, as a financial educator, I want to still instill that this is an issue across all genders. And we can see that here where 50% in comparison to 47%, right? So the discrepancy isn't very big, but it's still a really large number of people, ages 55 to 66%, that aren't saving for retirement. And this is some of the numbers that came from the U.S. Census Bureau. So it's really important to also note that women also lag on the other spectrum. So 22% of women, only 22% of women who do have savings have $100,000 or more in personal retirement in comparison to 30% of men. So these numbers do vary depending on their marital status, the number of children they have, and whether they've been divorced. But there is a difference between the women who are saving, and out of those women who are saving, how many of them are able to save more than $100,000 in this age group. all of these different studies are cited within the presentation. So if you're interested in learning more about them, we can always share the slides with you, and you can click on the link on each source and it'll take you where these studies were held. So just wanted to make that note. We'll go ahead and go on to the next question. So in 2019, the average credit score for a woman was what of these options in comparison to the 705 for a man? Perfect. So I see a couple of answers. It looks like a popular answer is B, 680. Let's go ahead and look at the answer. So the actual answer is 704. So it is actually very similar to men's credit score. This was a study done by Experian, and they cited that the difference is actually very minimal. Their women and men do tend to have an average credit score that is very similar. And I do want to go ahead and touch base on a couple of reasons why that is. So it is important to note that there are some legalities and some laws that were passed that have made it accessible for women to be able to start building their credit. So there was the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974. This was a legislation that changed the law, which allowed for greater access to credit by American women, enabling them to be able to take out loans and credit cards without relying on male co-signers or being unfairly penalized when taking out a home loan. So in the years since, women have largely climbed the credit and debt equity, achieving average credit scores that are identical to men. So it is important that we note that there are some serious results that can happen when we make laws and that we, put resources into things that can increase the equity between women and men. And to me, it is astounding to think that, this wasn't that long ago. It's 1974 that a woman would still need the permission of a male cosigner to be able to take on debt. So although we are still needing to make more progress, it is important to note that we are making actionable steps to building a more equitable space for both men and women. Additionally, we are still subjected to gender and based wage gaps. There are still challenges around credit availability, usage between men and women. Does still tend to be largely aligned today. So a couple more things that I'd like to share with you. In the past, women have faced many hurdles in accessing credit, and they were required to have male cosigners, as I mentioned, and even in circumstances where they weren't, they were still being asked to provide large down payments to get loans. And until the Equal Credit Opportunity Act came into effect, this allowed the prohibition of several practices that restricted women's access to credit and their ability to be financially self-reliant. There were also other laws that came into effect later that allowed, I think it was in and this might be more of an Agnes question, I can't remember the year exactly, which I think is 1989, which also allowed the law to be able to, women to access capital for the purpose of their business. And so that was less than almost 30 years ago. So I really love to put this into perspective because we are definitely making great strides, but it is important to take these kind of advocacy level lenses when we're making change because we can see the impact that it does have on later generations. A couple more facts that related to this. Men and women do carry essentially the same level of credit card debt. However, men do tend to carry more debt than women overall in every category except for student loans. So there is a couple of differences, just some general interesting FAQs. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. So this one is an entrepreneurship question. in New Mexico, what percentage of businesses are women-owned, according to the U.S. Census Bureau? Okay, so I see 32%, 20%, 32%. Awesome. So the answer is, and I believe Bianca got it correct, it is 20.9%. So 20% of all businesses are women-owned in the state of New Mexico. It is really important to note that New Mexico is actually one of the top 10 states with the highest percentage of women-owned businesses. So we are doing super awesome in that. There is still a gap, but I do want to acknowledge that there's a lot of work being done around that to support women. And that is a huge mission for West, is to be able to provide access for women and really foster entrepreneurship among women and decrease those barriers to starting their business. So we'll go ahead and move on to the last question of today. And this is related to confidence overall. So nearly half, 48% of women say that they feel confident about their finances, yet only what percentage feel empowered to take action on them? Awesome. So I see a couple answers, 23%, 17%. Perfect. So the correct answer is 28%. So Bank of America conducted a study and they announced the findings from a new body of research on women and financial wellness, which finds that about 94% of women believe that they will personally be responsible for the finances at some point in their adult life. But despite this, about only half of women feel confident about their finances. And out of those 48%, only 28% feel empowered to actually take action. So the women in general do have an understanding that they are now expected or will at some point make financial decisions for themselves. And they do have more access to feeling confident about their knowledge. But only a smaller percentage, about a quarter of women, feel empowered enough to do something about it. This study, which was published in a new report called Women, Money, Confidence, a Lifelong Relationship, gauged how women rate their financial health, with a majority of them reporting that they are, they feel really confident managing the day-to-day of their finances, like paying bills and following a budget. However, they're also struggling with long-term actions like paying down debts, saving for emergencies, and retirement. And a good percentage of them also had some challenges with building wealth. Only 1 in 5 women acknowledged that. So 20% of the women who participated in this study acknowledged that it was time to make a change in their finances. So it's really important to note that these kind of topics are in the mind of women, and it's becoming more normalized for women to be able to start having these conversations about money. We also found that women are less confident than men in making financial decisions, but it depended on the type of decision. So women and men felt about similarly confident when making routine household related decisions, like we mentioned, paying bills, budgeting. But women felt far less confident than men about making major financial decisions like investments and purchases of homes and those related areas that are typically more associated with building wealth. So we'll go ahead and take a few minutes just to debrief on this conversation and get your feedback about anything that stood out to you or anything that you'd like to share from this activity.
So feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments you'd like to share at this point.
You also feel free to share on the chat as well.
Agreed.
I'd just like to ask what are the reasons for, I understand that women were suppressed for many, many years. I had a wife, I've got 2 children, I've got 2 grandchildren. They're all girls. And I'm wondering, what is it that you think in their upbringing or in their educations created this problem?
That is an awesome question, Rob. And we actually will delve into a little bit more about the factors that have impacted. There are some playing factors into the discrepancies between this, but I'd love to highlight what you mentioned, that there is a substantial shift in the way that gender roles have played a role in who manages the finances. There are also several studies that have cited the role of women growing up, maybe second guessing their just their skills and their knowledge around whatever it is, not just subjected to financial related topics, but in general, maybe experiencing some challenges around feeling confident in their skills. So there's definitely some historical reasons. There's a lot of shifts now we're seeing in how women are managing money. So I think there's definitely some topics that I'll definitely go into more detail into that, but that is a perfect question, Rob. I really appreciate that. And I love that you're coming from the perspective of, a husband and a father, and just being really open to this discussion.
Well, there's got to be, I think a great deal of it has to do with education in the public schools. I don't think anybody's being taught proper finances or economics in the public schools. And then there's also the family. The family is the best place to educate your children about finances. And fortunately, I can remember my wife at one point saying, "Well, you're doing all the financial stuff. I don't know what's going on." I said, "Well, you take it over." She said, "Okay." And about 2 years later, she says, "Okay, you can have it back." There were no problems or anything, but I was glad to get rid of it. You want to pay all the bills, fine. And I think it taught her, but then at the end, she really didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I was happy to do it. I don't mind the accounting at all, but I think there's a mental thing possibly between women just because of they're different from men, and they aren't as interested in the finances as men are. And I don't know why that is, but I think it's true.
Yeah, that is a very great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll be taking some notes on the items you are all discussing. Anyone else would like to share about any feelings or thoughts that came up as a result of this very short but insightful?
Adriana, I would just reinforce a couple points that were made. One is historical. If you talk to female CPAs today that have retired in the past 15 years, they'll tell you that they were frequently the only female in their classes. So we have an education gap in terms of, just the historical piece. And then the second factor, I think, has to do with what was just mentioned by Mr. Sheldon. Where is financial literacy taught? I was fortunate to have parents who, even though they had no wealth, taught us a lot about financial literacy. I don't think kids today are so fortunate. If you have parents that take that time and teach those skill sets, that's great. But I think by and large, that doesn't happen. So therefore, we have a lot of kids graduating from high school who know very little about how to navigate the world of credit and money.
Those are excellent points, Agnes. And I do see that Emily shared here on the chat that a lot of people have apprehensions to big purchases because they saw family struggles through those particular purchases. That apprehension is learned and taught through example. So, reiterating the sentiment of the role that families can play in financial education and their attitudes towards money and debt and purchases. Thank you for sharing that, Emily.
And Adriana, just so that we don't feel rushed on your material, if it's okay to go back to your, I think this was a great break in the middle just to get people thinking, but if it's okay to go back to your presentation, and then we'll also have more Q&A at the end, if that's okay.
Absolutely. That is perfect. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and get back to the presentation, and we'll actually address a couple of the questions that were brought up around the factors that are impacting these differences in confidence, in knowledge, and just overall ability to be able to do it. So there were several different factors that are impacting. So one of them, like we mentioned, are these historical barriers, right? So the lack of access to lending products, discriminatory practices, a really long time of expecting certain genders to fulfill certain roles that may have, boosted the confidence of some of men to be able to feel confident in running financial, the financial aspects, and just overall speaking about money. We also can go a little bit into depth about gender roles, marital status, who makes financial decisions, whether a family chooses to engage in child rearing and what that means for women and men, and what that has traditionally meant. There are lots of now, there's a lot of pressure for women to be at home, to stay at home and take care of children. Even, for example, when companies do have paid leave for new parents, it's typically only granted to women. So even in small things like that, we are reestablishing the expectation that women are going to be the caretakers. And so that can also play a role not only in factors like income and access to being able to build more wealth. There are certain roles that are still at play. And I do want to reiterate that these things are shifting. And there's not technically, I do want to say there's just a difference in opportunity here. You are, and then also there's also differences in life expectancy. So women are expected to live longer, but they are also accumulating less wealth. So there's a lot of socioeconomic factors that do play a role in discrepancies among women and men. However, these are just examples that do not fully account to the differences between men and women. Socioeconomic factors such as income, education, employment, community safety, and social supports can play a significant role on how well people are able to manage these financial factors, and also how long they're able to live. I also want to introduce you into a topic of intersectionality. This is a huge cornerstone of social work, and we really like to discuss this because as you mentioned, right, these factors are just the beginning. Intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender. And all of these things can apply to an individual or a group. And all of these different factors will play a role that typically overlapped in our interdependent systems of discrimination and disadvantages. So there may be some other factors, like you all shared. If you don't have access to, if you come from a family that may be economically disadvantaged, then you will have a different experience about even just what you consider wealth and what your opportunities are around that. That supersede or go beyond just gender. So it is important that while we are discussing a couple of factors, there are a lot of different things that are impacting the differences between women and men. And it is not just the one single factor that is playing a role. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this one, I do want to take a moment before we do go ahead and delve into more of what we're doing. I do want to take a moment to just define financial capability. So often we hear the terms financial education, financial literacy, and all of these things are super important. But I want to be able to go beyond just the knowledge base, right? Yes, knowledge is super important, and teaching this in the high schools and talking about the attitudes, the behaviors, all of this is super, super important. And equally important is the access, right? So we can definitely talk to people about this is how you budget, this is how you would get a credit card, this is how you build awesome credit. But if people don't have access to actually opening a credit card, if they don't have the income to support their family, the knowledge gets lost in translation. So this is where a very common term in credit union world is financial capability. It is the combination of attitude, knowledge, skills, and self-efficacy needed to make and exercise money management decisions that best fit the circumstances of one's life within an enabling environment that includes, but is not limited to, access to appropriate financial services. So we take a huge factor of this. We really embed this into the way that we do our curriculum here at West, is that we really focus on knowledge and access. So we're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide to talk a little bit about what West is doing to be able to support entrepreneurs and people who are just interested in using entrepreneurship as a way to build wealth. So we take a holistic approach to supporting entrepreneurs. We have lots of different services that are offered and open to any New Mexican here in the state. So we do business training, we do consulting, we have a lending program that is able to support people in that startup phase. And we have lots of programs that focuses around access to people who might come from a disadvantaged background, who might have had challenges with their credit. We really support people in this. We also have an incubation program here in Albuquerque that fosters that beginning stages and are able to walk people step by step on how to use entrepreneurship as an opportunity to build wealth. And lastly, we have the studio here at West, which allows entrepreneurs and community organizations and people to be able to take their film or just be able to film a video so that they can present their business out into the world. If you're interested in learning more about this, we're happy to share those resources with you. But this is a couple of an overview of what West is. Now, within that, we'll go on to the next slide. Within all of this, we do have the Money Learning Lab program, which is the program that I am grateful to be able to manage. So this program is a program that specifically focuses on all things money. We talk about personal finances. We talk about the business finances and trying to make those connections. We have been able to partner with a lot of different organizations across the state to support entrepreneurship and access to financial education amongst people who are immigrants, amongst people in rural communities, high school students. And so we really feel very strongly about supporting communities with increasing their knowledge and confidence with making financial decisions. So we're going to go ahead and share a short video to illustrate one of our awesome projects that we've been working on. This one is specifically focused around childcare and increasing access to childcare in the state through entrepreneurship.
And I just need a verification when it starts that you all can hear it. So here we go.
Thank you, Jeff. We can hear it.
The most important part of the Money Learning Lab is the real world impact that we have on people. Putting the knowledge that we have in these people's hands, we have been able to kind of help level that playing field.
One of my favorite things about the Money Learning Lab is helping take people from that place of fear and discomfort to that point where the light bulb really turns on.
Over the years that West has worked with thousands of clients across the state, we've seen the lack of knowledge about the financial part of one's business. So the Money Learning Lab was really a response to needs that we have seen and heard from our clients for many, many years.
The Money Learning Lab is a program designed to assist people in really understanding their finances, not only on the personal, but also the business side. We really try to focus on giving access to people who traditionally don't have access to these services. We have identified the fact that there is a big barrier in language.
Lo maravilloso de la asociación con West fue que pudimos dar muchas de las clases en español.
We find that taking this equitable language approach has a much deeper impact because as a native Spanish speaker myself, you can always tell when something wasn't developed specifically for you.
By us really making sure that we're able to provide these kind of trainings in Spanish, it puts people in the same place and they have the same amount of opportunities that other people do. We have a lot of entrepreneurs who are very, very intelligent and they are able to accomplish so much. But when there are laws, regulations, and contracts that they have to sign that aren't in their language, it's very daunting to them to think I am getting into all of these legal implications with my business and I don't even understand what I'm signing.
If we can really pour our resources and focus on the people that need it most and elevate them so that we create a level playing field for entrepreneurs, there's no question that the economy of New Mexico will take off. Small business is the backbone of the American economy and it should be the backbone of New Mexico's economy.
We go into communities and we try to identify organizations that are so committed to working with them, that know them so well.
Growing up, New Mexico had a wonderful partnership with West and the Money Learning Lab, as well as Partnership for Community Action, in doing a home-based care accelerator.
What we have found in the Money Learning Lab when we partner with organizations is that in addition to the overlap of trying to serve and help the community, both organizations really bring a whole slew of resources and expertise that wouldn't have been accessible if we had tried to develop and deliver this on our own.
The partnership was really natural in the sense that we had this deep relationship with community, and West brought the expertise of business development and business growth.
The accelerator really allowed PCA in partnership with West and Growing Up New Mexico to meet people where they are.
Yo vengo de México y allá estudié psicología. Cuando vine acá no pude revalidar mi carrera. Yo siento que es mi vocación trabajar con niños, más no ser una empresaria, ¿no? O tener un negocio. He batallado mucho con lo financiero.
Trying to run your business and take care of children is kind of hard to be able to separate the two. I made a lot of mistakes that I had to pay for at the end.
Antes de conocer Money Learning Lab, no tenía ni siquiera la idea de que podía hacer esto posible. Solamente estaba en un trabajo de niñera, ganando muy poquito dinero.
We know that there is a big barrier to financial literacy with small business owners.
Through the accelerator, we were able to break down the complexity of these things and make them accessible and comprehensible so that they could do better.
Una de las cosas bien importantes del acelerador es que las empoderamos.
I feel empowered just taking those classes. Now I have the foundation, even 21 years in the business.
The Money Learning Lab never looks the same. Every iteration of it is different because instead of us instilling the topics in their minds, we use human-centered design to really develop and deliver curriculum that's specifically tailored for that community. It addresses their needs, their fears, their concerns, while keeping a focus on their objectives and their goals.
Ahora que interactué con el Money Learning Lab, eso me ayudó a ser más organizada con mis cuentas, a pensar un poquito más cómo invertir mi dinero. Pues a través de estos programas tuve la oportunidad de tener mi licencia y saber que puedo tener estabilidad económica para mi familia y brindar mejor educación para los niños de mi comunidad.
Finances are a taboo topic for a lot of people, and so we have to keep these financial trauma sensitivities in mind so that we don't betray that trust and we can keep them engaged and we can have the most impact.
To see them just hearing the word finance and feeling nervous about it and being able to go to a place where they start to understand. People are so grateful for that, and it makes me sad because it's not something that you should be thankful for because you haven't had access to it before. It should be normal to understand finances. It should be normal to have this kind of education in your language, in your culture.
Cuando yo vengo a Estados Unidos y digo aquí no soy nadie, aquí yo no tengo una carrera, aquí yo no tengo todo lo que tenía allá y voy a empezar de cero. Ok, sigo siendo lo que soy, sigo teniendo una profesión, más ahora estoy formando algo nuevo y me siento realizada. Yo les digo, soy maestra, pero también soy directora, pero también soy ahora emprendedora.
There are tangible ways that people actually improve their lives, and we get to be a part of that.
We want them to be financially independent, to be able to sustain themselves financially so that then they could be successful in other parts of their life.
The Money Learning Lab has one overarching goal, and that's defeating poverty through financial empowerment, whether that's personal finances or business finances.
Thank you so much for showing that video. This is an example of one of the projects that we've done here. And I do just want to highlight that we are one of the many organizations that are really passionate about working together and bringing financial education and financial capability in the state of New Mexico. There are different organizations focused around youth education. There are several coalitions that are taking initiatives to increase banking access for people in rural areas, people who have traditionally not had access. So I do just want to highlight that this is a huge effort that we are taking as a state. There are definitely strides that we are making forward to increasing financial education and opportunities for all New Mexicans. And we're just really grateful to be part of that. So we do want to have some time, we want to spend some time to really understand how you all can get involved. These are just some examples of things that you can individually do. So we have a list of organizations that we partner with that do focus on financial education. An example that I'd love to share with you all, there's an organization called NMCAN here in Albuquerque that focuses around supporting youth who have gone through the foster care system, and they have a program that does financial education for individuals. And so you're always welcomed to volunteer in those capacities. Find organizations that enable you to share the knowledge that you do have, fostering a sense of knowledge and comfort around these financial topics. I will say, as a person who's worked in finance for a really long time and have worked in financial coaching, it is always very, I wouldn't say surprising, but we can find adults, and more adults than not, that still don't feel comfortable talking about money. So it's not just youth, it's not just, teenagers, it's really people all across the age spectrum that are, having the repercussions of not having access to this education. So finding people who are super passionate about this work and being able to have those honest conversations and really come from a perspective of understanding that we are, not everyone has the same access to the same knowledge and the same tools. So, having that perspective, I think, is really important. And as we have seen, right, advocating for better laws and regulations that increase equity. We've seen some amazing strides towards financial education here in New Mexico. Recently, they just passed a law that is making it more of and Agnes, I think if you can speak on this a little bit more, but that has made it more access that students in high school do have to receive financial education. That is really, really important, right? Because I think only maybe 15 states out of the whole country require financial education as a graduation requirement. We also saw some laws that passed around decreasing the amount of interest rate that predatory lenders can charge. So up to just recently, a lot of businesses or predatory lenders were able to charge 100, 200, 300% interest rate on a $500 loan, as an example. I think that was capped at 36%, if I am correct. And so these are things that we can do, and that does have an impact on people at the greater scale. So always advocating for better laws and regulations is really important. Another thing that we can recommend is that you share your expertise with your community. So for example, here at the Money Learning Lab, we often do trainings for the whole state that involve us connecting with people who are financial advisors, who are certified public accountants, lawyers, or people who are educators. So we're able to make connections with them. And these are just examples of people who have knowledge that want to share that knowledge with the state. And so there's always a place for anyone who has any passion for financial education, but I'd love to hear more about you and see what your thoughts are, and just if you'd like to discuss anything further.
Perfect. Any questions? And thank you, Adriana, for that presentation. Any questions from the audience?
That for a long time, financial literacy has not been taught in the schools, and yet I kind of feel that some of the schools are getting back to that. Do you have any insight on that and what's happening there?
Okay, Bianca, I just want to make sure that I understood your question. So I see that if I understood correctly, you've seen that previously in the education system, there hasn't really been a push for financial education. And now that we are making strides towards it, you might see some hesitance toward that. Does that sound correctly or correct?
No, I actually think that they're trying to get some financial literacy back in the schools.
Perfect.
Through,
and I'll comment on that if you don't mind. Several years ago, probably about 8 or 10, they did. There was a state law that passed that made it possible for financial literacy to be one of the electives for high school students. However, that was an unfunded mandate. So it's great to pass a state law, but I dare say that teachers were not, they didn't have the capability in many cases to teach financial literacy training. So from my own perspective, I think that fell a little bit flat. I think it was in last year's session where I still don't know, by the way, how much money was put behind this initiative. We're going in the right direction as far as schools are concerned, but I don't think we're going there fast enough. And so you're right, Bianca, that they're starting, I think, to be recognition in all sectors, whether it's from parents, teachers, and then, once a kid leaves school, their ability to navigate the financial world. And, when you've got young 22 and 3-year-olds getting in a deep financial hole with credit and easy access to credit because they've learned nothing about how important it is to manage that. And anyway, we're moving in the right direction. I certainly wish we'd move faster. I'd love to see a statewide initiative from the governor's office on down that focuses on financial literacy, not only in schools, out of schools, but Because what we see at West are 40 and 50-year-olds who want to start a business and may have little to no knowledge of anything related to money and finance.
And it may be, in addition to education, just talking about it in the home as kids are growing up. So anybody here on this call, if you have young people in your orbit, just having those discussions now, it sounds like can help set a good foundation from what you said, Adriana.
Absolutely, Jen, and it's super important that we do have those discussions. I did see that Mr. Sheldon had a comment.
Yes. You are on mute, Rob, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. No problem. And we do have 5 minutes left in the session, just for everybody's awareness.
Yeah, I'm
Go ahead.
a little bit confused by a lot of the things you said, and particularly one thing stood out from your presentation, and that was increase equity, increase equity. I don't like the word equity in the first place. I don't believe it is a word, but I think we strive for financial equity. We're going to lose it because there won't be examples of people who other people should strive to match, economically. The equity thing can just wipe us out. It really can. I think that the family thing is more important. I can remember, I think one of the big things that assisted me throughout my life was that my father had a huge respect for his elders. And he had a lot of elders, a lot of uncles who really weren't uncles, but they acted as his uncles. And he kind of gave us that same respect. And I think that I respected my elders. And one of the things I never did, I spent a lot of time with elderly people, elderly people in the church and elderly people in my family and so on and so forth. And I always believed everything they told me. And I never tried to reinvent the wheel. And as a result, I just went through life very easily and very successfully. And it wasn't because of anything I learned in school. It was basically what I learned from my family and outsiders from the family. And I kind of wonder why our families have dissolved or just deteriorated to such a situation where we now have to take kids and teach them in school everything and stress equity to them, when really equity isn't what we need at all. So that's just my thoughts on what's been said.
Mr. Sheldon, I would love to hear what your definition of equity is, because I think it might be different than our perspective of equity. So I think it would be really helpful to hear that from.
Well, like I said, I don't believe in the word. I can't define it to you because I don't believe in it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
And it could be, let me just take this, it could be a deeper discussion too, like a longer term, just like you're pointing to, Adriana, like making sure we're talking about the same terms. And sadly, we only have about 90 seconds left in the session. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we as Rotarians do, right? We have conversations about this. We get on the same page with our definitions. And just like you're pointing to, Rob, the young people in your orbit, anything you can do in your family, or you mentioned your uncles that are outside your family, talk to young people about this. That's something we can do as people of action to help close this gap, because it's clearly a gap, not just for young women, I think for young people in general. So
yes, true. I think the men need this education as much as the women, the boys, let's put it that way.
Thank you so much, Adriana. We're just about to be kicked out of the room. So I want to just thank you so much. And Agnes Noonan, President of West, thank you so much for joining us and supporting this presentation. And as I mentioned earlier in the main room, this will be recorded and posted so that it can be shared with others who weren't able to attend.